Hello and welcome to Insight, everyone. I'm Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. Thank you for joining us.
Today, many families are forced to make tough choices about what ends up on their plate. This is clearly what happens as these families grapple and contend with subsistence amidst rising economic challenges in the country. But in the quest for affordability and survival, can we afford to compromise on food safety and healthy choices? We will, on this episode, tackle the critical issues of food safety and healthy eating choices in difficult times. It is also the Public Awareness Month on breast cancer, and we will, in another conversation, uncover the realities of the devastating disease, its impact in Nigeria, as well as emerging treatment options and the hope of survivors. Elizabeth?
Still on issues that affect women, we will take a look at stereotyping, how it affects women and society. And of course, changing the narrative is our focus.
Very well then, let's kickstart the program.
Whatever the issues are,
the National Assembly is constitutionally empowered to scrutinize,
however complex or intricate.
We have involved all the academia, the members of the academia. We have involved the academies.
Be it government policies or in fact any issue of public concern.
Our job is to help you gain clarity and make sense of it all.
This is not really healthy for our democracy.
There's a lot of agreements in terms of who has been in power longest and who becomes the governor of the state.
It's also in the quality of food being consumed.
After all, perception is insight.
And gaining understanding is also getting insight.
Well, the struggle is real, rising cost, dwindling purchasing power of incomes, and a bewildering array of food options. How do we ensure that our meals nourish rather than cause harm? For the next 20 or so minutes, we will delve into the world of food safety and healthy food choices with the aim of discovering practical solutions for a healthier and safer plate. Let me bring in my guest, Dr. Hafsat Sani Zango Daura. She is a medical doctor, a food safety advocate and preventative medicine specialist. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you join us. Let's begin by laying the foundation for this discourse. While I know, and a lot of our viewers, of course, might easily relate with the gastrointestinal symptoms being the most common clinical presentations of foodborne diseases. Is it true that they could also manifest in chronic life-threatening symptoms and deaths? Perhaps you could begin with some of the most common foodborne hazards in Nigeria and tell us, how consumers can protect themselves.
So it's really like a very broad subject matter. However, oftentimes, people, when they think of food safety, they think really only of the preparation of the food. So are there contaminants, for example? But for me, those are really important issues. However, what we have to consider also is the way in which our food is farmed, the way in which our chickens and fish is being reared. These are all really important things that we need to think about. Do you see what I mean? It's not simply a case of, I've cooked the rice and it's well cooked and the chicken is well cooked. We have to dial it all the way back, and we have to take it all the way back to the farms and how they're being taken care of at the farm. I don't know whether that answers your question.
Yeah, but I wanted you to give us examples of some of the common food hazards, but now you're taking us back to the farms.
Yes.
And in terms of practices, when we talk about food safety practices, and you're saying you think some of these precautions should begin right from the farm.
Yes.
What exactly are some of these practices that you're talking about, and how can farmers, even at that point, begin to, bring some of these practices into effect?
Right. So the farming practices, a lot of our farmers now use a lot of pesticides.
Oh.
When they're growing their produce, they use pesticides because obviously they want higher yields. And pesticides help with that because it means that pests aren't eating or consuming and completely obliterating your crops, you see. So they use a lot of pesticides, and not just pesticides, like things like egusi. Some people would use certain chemicals to whiten it, to make it more sort of appealing to the consumer. Another issue also is beans. People put a lot of chemicals like sniper to keep their beans away from, you know, pests and such. So these are all things that we really need to start having conversations about, because it's not just a case of cooking the food. We have to dial it back, like I mentioned before. We have to make sure that the food is actually safe for human consumption. Do you see?
You know, I am sure that food safety experts like yourself have continued to have, you know, key debates on this issue, you know, especially within the broader context of developing policies and ultimately improving food safety culture here in Nigeria. What are your thoughts on some of the current food safety regulations in Nigeria and their effectiveness, or maybe ineffectiveness, as the case may be? Again, that's for one. Again, how can we improve? Because you talked about having conversations now, and so I'd like to ask you this. How can we improve on social behavior change, especially social behavior change communications, to reverse negative motivations that seem to further, you know, compound this whole issue of food safety in Nigeria?
There are lots of middlemen. That's what I found, where our food is concerned. So the person, say for example, egusi, if you're farming egusi, you usually take it to the market, someone buys it off of you, and the person selling it at the market is probably someone different from the person that purchased it from the farmer. And so that person at the market wants to sell his products, right? The produce is there, he doesn't want it to go bad, so he puts chemicals on it in order to ensure that we have these customers that will come and take it off his hands. So we need to look at that. I find that there's I mean, obviously I don't know what the law says about our food and how it's being regulated, but I know, I can tell you as a consumer, there probably isn't a way of, even if there are laws laid down, there aren't actual ways to ensure that they are being implemented.
You know, I asked you earlier how consumers like us, you know, can protect themselves. Perhaps you can take that up at this point. And I mean, knowing what we know about some of those practices, you made allusions to some negative practices that begin from the farm. When they get to the table, I mean, the food gets to the table at the end of the day, or before they even get to the table, we go to the shelves, to the supermarkets, to the open markets to make some of these purchases. How can we as consumers begin to protect ourselves?
First of all, I would definitely encourage people to start looking more at purchasing more local produce. So be concerned with where your food comes from. That's very, very important. Be concerned with, if, say, for example, so you found out that this particular farm does fish, for example, go to the farm, take your kids, for example, if you have the time. But I always say it's imperative to make the time, right? Because it's what you eat. It essentially becomes who you are. So take the time, know the producers of your food, and then find a way to hold them to account. If you're buying fish from a particular fish vendor, know where she gets her fish from, and then sort of dialing it all the way back. If she may be forthcoming and tell you, oh, actually, I get it from this farm, try and visit the farm, see what the farming practices are at that farm. I would certainly not go in there charging in and trying to tell people how to do their jobs, but, you know, engage in dialogue with them, understand what it is they do at their farms, and then see if you can convince them that actually leaning towards safer methods is better for their market. Because if everybody is sick, you know, from eating the fish, surely no fish will be bought because they're busy, you know, paying hospital bills.
You know, a lot has been said about ready-to-eat foods and products on supermarket shelves and all of that. But then, what more role do you think traditional markets play in food safety, and how can food vendors, in your opinion, be held accountable for some of these actions?
They absolutely have to be held accountable. They absolutely have to be held accountable because some people genuinely don't know any better. Not because they choose not to, they just don't know, right? Not everybody has the privilege of watching NTA and having, being able to see this and start having the conversation, right? But we do need to find ways to hold food vendors, especially those small-scale food vendors. The big-scale ones, you can hold them to account a little bit more, right, than, say, the smaller ones. But we have to devise ways that we hold food vendors in general to account, because our hospitals are not well equipped to deal with the onslaught. The levee is about to break, and it's not a joke when we say that cancer is on the rise, mental health issues are on the rise, and people think, well, what has food got to do with it? A lot, actually. Food is medicine. True. Right? My motto is let food be thy medicine. And so if you eat well, I've seen it with my parents, especially my father. He's in his 80s. SubhanAllah, he could outrun you. Sorry. Really? Probably. But it's because I've watched him eat well.
I'd like to see him outrun me.
I'll tell him. But he eats well and he works out. And so for an 80-something-year-old man, he's done really well for himself because of his diet. And obviously genetics play a role, right? But his diet, predominantly his diet, because the genetics work in concert with your, diet to, produce or, mitigate disease.
You brought up the issue of diet. I think maybe this is an opportunity for us to talk a bit about that. And of course, we've talked about the times being really tough, and knowing how there are food deserts scattered across the country. What plays out now is a situation where when the desirable is not available, the available becomes the desirable, implying that availability, by all means, impacts choices. So if you put that properly within the context of healthy food quality and choices, I wonder, since you brought up this whole issue of diet, I wonder what, nutritious, affordable food options exist for low-income families, and how you think they can assess them on a sustainable basis, even within, the context of our current economic realities.
I think we mentioned previously in one of my conversations with you that this is a conversation that could go on for hours. To be honest, I'm a huge advocate for doing things yourself. I don't enjoy the notion of allowing other people to sort of solve your issues. Low-income families, there are we have so much land. We have so much land. And I know that it probably sounds a bit insensitive now because a lot of people can't go to farm, right, because of the insecurity issues. But a lot of houses, even if you live in Kubwa, you can grow a lot of food in sacks now. There's this lady that we constantly have conversations with and are trying to figure out a way to put heads together in promoting this idea, right, of people actually growing produce themselves. So as I was coming here, there were huge patches of land that were not cultivated. Why aren't people trying? Because it's within the city, so it's not a matter of safety now. Are we willing? Are we ready?
You don't think access to such land could be an issue?
No, I don't imagine that it would be. Because even if it's not in the CBD here, right? But within your locality, within Kubwa, within your house, there are people, you could literally grow yams. There are people doing it now. People growing yams in sacks. Do you see what I mean? People are growing, so if, say, for example, you live in a compound, your neighbor could grow yams, you could grow potatoes, someone else could grow tomatoes, and like find a way. Do you see what I mean? Because I think hard times make you think better.
Ah, true. Makes you get
more creative, right? I mean, that's just what I believe.
Okay.
From experience.
From experience. You've tried it yourself?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, you know, many, still on this whole issue of dieting and, you know, or rather nutritious diet and eating well, many believe, or rather they still view healthy eating as being too restrictive. You know, you talk about low fat, you talk about low calories, you talk about appropriate sugar or gauging sugar properly. Then there are also, you know, the perceptions that healthy foods are quite expensive and their recipes also complex. How can people overcome some of these misconceptions and, you know, manage the desired change they need? You know, and then if you just quickly, in answering that, also speak to the issue of, you know, these ready-to-eat foods. How can consumers make informed choices today amidst misleading labeling and the preponderance of advertising?
Wow, Namdi. I mean, how much time do you have?
No, well, if you just take it from the
let me
first
just say this,
yes.
Okay? I'm going to reiterate the fact that we need to stop allowing our power to just sort of dissipate. We need to take our power back. How do we take our power back? You can start growing your own food.
Okay.
Right? This is what we've done recently in my compound. It's a family compound, it's a small little family compound, and the ladies on that compound and I have decided to put money together and buy some seedlings and some seeds and grow a lot of the produce ourselves. That's what we're doing. So I like farming. I'm doing the labor, and they get to eat fresh produce. So labels, you mentioned about going to the supermarket. I'm sorry. You mentioned about going to the supermarket.
And making some of these choices
yes.
amid the preponderance of misleading information, you know, and, you know,
I'm going to get
advertising as well.
Yeah, I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but you're giving the supermarkets your power. Stop giving them your power. Grow your own produce for the most part, and then the things that you can't grow, like milk, for example. Do you know that the milk we consume in this country is not actually milk? It's not milk.
So what exactly is it?
A lot of filler and a very tiny amount of milk. What did our grandparents do without supermarkets? We need to just go back to the basics. And I know a lot of people are going to be, oh, shut up. What do you mean go back to the basics? We've come so far. Go back to the basics. Our grandparents used to grow a lot of their produce and they lived really well. We need to start looking at how we can take our power back by removing these supermarkets.
Great.
I love going to the supermarket because it's convenient, but maybe convenience is the issue. We're too involved and too engrossed in what is convenient, and we're slowly killing ourselves.
And your thoughts very quickly, because we need to begin to round off at this point. Your thoughts very quickly on the perception that, you know, healthy living is too restrictive, low fats, low calories, and all of that, and that the recipes might be too complex to understand. How do we begin to correct some of these misconceptions? So
I'm happy that you use the word misconception. It is a huge misconception. Healthy living is not restrictive. Actually, it's unfortunate that convenience and, you know, the people that have marketed convenience to us have done such a good job of marketing convenience. And so now we think healthy is restrictive, but it's not. Just be moderate in everything that you're doing. It's very important. Nobody said you can't eat meat. Someone is now saying, oh, you can't eat meat, but we have it on good authority. God created animals, you know, and subdued them for our benefit. We can get milk from them, so many benefits. Skin, meat, and we can have them for riding. So these are benefits that God himself created for us, but then now there's so many of these fads going around. You have to be careful where you get your information. Do you see what I mean? They're telling you you can't eat meat, you can't eat, animal fat, but actually the oils that they're pumping no better than engine oil, all this refined oil that we're getting in the supermarket. So go back to the basics. Don't, subscribe to this Western philosophy of what healthy is. What did your grandparents do before you?
I'm sure a lot of Nigerians listening and watching you right now would wonder why Dr. Afsa is telling us to go back to those days that would seem mundane. But of course, it can be easy, taking some of these steps and going back there, but I'm sure. And of course, I also wanted us to talk a bit more on healthy choices or how to make healthy choices in difficult times. But of course, this is a going conversation. Hopefully, we'll be able to get you back into the studio some other time to pursue that line of conversation. Dr. Afsa Sani Zango Daura, medical doctor, food safety advocate, and preventative medicine specialist. I'd like to thank you so much for coming on Insight. It's been a pleasure having you on the program.
Thank you so much. I look forward to having more conversations about these issues because they're so important. Like I mentioned, our hospitals really, our healthcare system is not ready for the deluge that will befall us if we don't take these matters seriously.
True, very true. Hopefully we'll bring you back into the studio sometime real soon and we'll continue. Thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure.
Moving on, the month of October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, which basically reinforces the urgency for policy and action in the fight against the devastating disease. Here in Nigeria, breast cancer claims thousands of lives annually with late detection and limited access to quality care, exacerbating the crisis. And with that in mind, we know for a fact that Nigeria's fight requires awareness, education, and action. I'm now joined by Dr. Fatima Dan Bata, Medical Coordinator, Medic Aid Cancer Foundation. Dr. Fatima and I would have the tough conversation, and she will help us dispel myths and on breast cancer, of course, and inspire action. Welcome to Inside, Dr. Fatima.
Good morning. Thank you for having me this morning.
Good to have you here. I have seen the alarming statistics, as I'm sure you have as well, and I have a feeling that based on your expertise, you're inundated with personal stories of families impacted by breast cancer, coming from where and how long you've been in this field. Well, coming from all of that, are you seeing the kind of advances that you might have envisioned in terms of, say, screening, in terms of, say, diagnosis, and even in terms of treatment options here in Nigeria?
Thank you for your question. I'll say yes, a little, but we still have such a long way to go. There have been a lot of efforts over the years to raise awareness and educate people on cancer. We have made the early detection message clear. We have tried to put it out there, but still our cancers are diagnosed late. Breast cancer is still diagnosed late. Treatment options automatically will narrow when we diagnose our cancers late, and of course survival will reduce. We need to do more. Simply put, I know that there are a lot of efforts at Medicaid. We try to do that. The doctors, the oncologists, the clinicians, even the government is doing a lot. But there is a need to put it more out there. There is a need to raise more awareness, to educate people, to invite women to screen at discounted prices or even free screening so that we can begin to catch this cancer early.
There's the thing about women and breast cancer, centered on the campaign, Know Your Risks, Know Your Power. This promotes practices like self-examination, early detection, and support as well. These days, we hear even of women less than 40, who are not necessarily of screening age, that how they present with symptoms. And in some cases, they are subsequently diagnosed with breast cancer. How important are these elements that I mentioned earlier, elements like self-examination, screening, and early detection for any case management?
Oh, definitely. It is what will make the change. You say 25, 24, 28-year-olds. I have seen a 28-year-old new mother, a breastfeeding mother, lose her life to breast cancer. We're seeing cancers in very young women, and cancers in women that have no risk factors. You know, there was a publication by the World Health Organization earlier this year, and worldwide, over half of the women that are now diagnosed with breast cancer do not have any of the common risk factors that we would like to say that science has told us, oh, you know, she has to be a woman of a certain age, there has to be a genetic component to it. All of that is sadly being thrown out of the window. Breast cancer is being diagnosed in very young women, aggressive forms at very late stages. So everybody needs to be proactive. I tell young girls in secondary schools, I tell women in universities, at work, everywhere, as long as you're a woman with a breast that has developed, please start to check it. A breast exam can save your life. A lot of the cases of breast cancer that are diagnosed early is because a woman did a self-breast exam and found a lump herself. Being familiar with your own breasts will make you know immediately there is any change, and you will seek help. There is no way to beat this thing unless we start to find these lumps and diagnose these cancers early. I like to say that when a breast lump is just a lump limited to the breast and has not spread, then it becomes easier to have an intervention, go in, take out that lump, perhaps a course of chemotherapy, and a woman can continue her life. But you can imagine, because if cancer says it is going to spread, that's why it is cancer. If the cancer has spread to the liver, it has spread to the lungs, it's in the brain, in the spine, then the treatment options become much more difficult, and the chance of survival is less. So whether you have a family history or not, whether it is a, you know, people call it the God forbid disease, so whether it is your portion or not, it is important for every woman to check her breast. And if you are above the age of 40, a mammogram once a year is non-negotiable. Even if you're younger than 40, you need to go into the hospital at least once a year, get a breast scan or get an examination by a clinician. How long does a self-breast exam take? Less than 5 minutes, but it can save your life.
Dr. Fatima, you admit that, yes, you've seen cases where 25-year-old, in fact, you mentioned one fatal case, the new mother who passed on from breast cancer. Are there perhaps some driving or some factors driving what we're now seeing amongst younger women not necessarily of the age for screening and all of that? Does it perhaps have anything to do with lifestyle and all of that? I mean, what could possibly be some of the driving factors for some of what we're seeing these days?
Oh, definitely lifestyle. So even though we still have a lot of research ongoing, but there is a shift. So these days we live fast-paced lives and we want everything fast, and that is also with food. We're eating more of processed foods, we're eating foods with preservatives, we're forgetting to rest, we're not exercising as we should, we're not taking our fruits and vegetables, and this changes. Cancer is a disease of the cell. It starts at that cellular level, and so your cells need to be able to renew and regenerate properly. If you're giving them the right substances, the right fruits, vegetables, you know, those proper things, antioxidants to deal with the free radicals in your body, then we expect that they're going to keep regenerating properly. This is not to say that a person that lives a completely healthy lifestyle cannot come down with cancer, but we're just trying to say that the lifestyle choices that we make, the practices that we engage in, increase the risk of cancer these days, because we are moving away from the natural foods that will cause the right antioxidants that will fight against these cancer cells in our body. So definitely lifestyle.
So part of what this whole campaign advocates as well is some lifestyle modification, and we need to push, you know, behavioral change communications more. But Dr. Fatima, before we go any further, I'd like for you to reinforce hope for those currently engaged in this struggle? I mean, perhaps by sharing some personal stories of resilience and triumph that you have at cost to share in based off your work. It is my hope that in sharing such stories, you may just as well be empowering some women to take control of their health. Do you have stories you can share with us?
Oh, definitely. So just 2 days ago, one of my favorite champions, we call them, a breast cancer survivor, just celebrated her 40th birthday. And I remember I couldn't join the party, but I sent her a message and I said, oh, your strength, your resilience, because this is someone that has been through it and has come out of the other end. And she's spending every minute of her life to, educate others, to impact others. Cancer can be survived. You know what makes it such a scary disease in Nigeria is because cancer treatment is still largely out of pocket, and then we diagnose our cancers late. But if more women are screening, if we're detecting our cancers early, then the chances of survival are higher. There is a whole network of people impacted by cancer in Nigeria, cancer survivors, beautiful women that have gone on to live their lives, and men, I have to add, that have gone on to live their lives and are now impacting people. So it can be survived. This disease can be survived. It's possible. I will advise that, don't allow the stigma to stop you from seeking treatment. Because that is what we see a lot of times, abandonment of treatment. You go to the hospital, you hear about the chemo, the radiotherapy, you're scared. Perhaps if there's no supportive family, before you know it, people just abandon the treatment and think it will disappear somehow, or even worse still, go and look for some herbal remedies and so on. And by the time they come back to the hospital, we have cancer that has spread everywhere, has metastasized. So you can beat it. Whoever you are, if you need to hear this, this is a disease that you can beat. But you have to stay strong. You have to, build up your support system and do the right thing. Stick to your treatments. If you're someone that is at home listening to us, please screen. I cannot say this enough. Check for cancer. Early detection truly saves lives.
Indeed, early detection saves lives. I mean, you brought up a couple of issues there. You talked about stigma. I'd like for us to dial that on that. But let's take it within the context of, this whole breast cancer advocacy, and maybe you could bring in, at this point, you could bring in some of your work there at Medicare, I beg your pardon, Cancer Foundation, your foundation, especially in the area of breaking down barriers for care for affected patients and those also impacted, like their families, of course. There's also the issue of affordability of treatment and care options. Let's not also forget issues of myths and stigma that you talked about. How much so is the breast cancer advocacy in Nigeria doing in all of these areas, or some of these areas at least?
So, when it comes to cancer care, there is a lot to unpack, and that's what we've been doing at Medicaid for over 15 years now, Medicaid Cancer Foundation. We have been working to raise awareness and educate people on cancers. We started with breast, we have spread to other ones now, inviting women to screen, running free or discounted screening programs, and then also advocating because the policy surrounding this care needs to change. We need to see some improvements. Cancer care is very expensive, and I say that truly, no matter who you are, if you have a loved one affected by cancer, there is no way you are not going to feel it. Cancer care is that expensive, and it needs all hands on deck. We do have the Cancer Health Fund in Nigeria across about 6 centers, but is it enough? Definitely not for the burden of cancer that we have. So there is a need to do more. There is a need to subsidize cancer care better, and there is a need for other people to join in. We have seen the efforts of our advocacy pay off over the last few years. I mean, the Cancer Health Fund that I just talked about is one of the, it's a child of this advocacy efforts, one of them. There are a lot, the chemotherapy access programs and so many of them. And we have seen more people come out to talk about cancer. We have seen a reduction in the stigma surrounding it. There is still more that could be done.
Stigma and myth. I mean, you referenced it earlier.
Myths, yes. And myths surrounding it. We have seen a reduction. People are a little more aware. Even when we go into communities now, it's not how it used to be in 5 years ago, for example, let me say. People have a basic idea now of what this disease is and some of the things that they need to do. So that is progress, but again, a lot more honestly needs to be done.
Dr. Fatima, is there something you think has been lacking in the campaign on breast cancer that you would think this October breast cancer month, I beg your pardon, should, focus more on? And what kind of action would you like to see, going forward in the coming days, in the coming months and years?
So what I would hope for is that all hands should be on deck. Like I said, cancer is not a one-person disease.
True.
So this is whether you're the one that is diagnosed. If you have one person in a family that is diagnosed with cancer today, I promise you, everybody in that family is going to feel its effects. So we need to start now. It needs to start by you listening to this, telling your neighbor, oh, did you remember to do your mammogram this year? Have you checked your breast this month? We need people to become individual advocates. That's the only way we're going to beat this thing, by coming together. So we can't just do the campaign. It's great. The work that is done in the month of October, you see a lot of people campaigning, walks here and there. We have a walk coming up on the 2nd of November. I should add, please join us. But beyond the month of October, we need to be proactive. We need to be reminding women. Men need to be supporting their women. I want date night to also be like, oh, let's go to the hospital and get your mammogram day, something like that. We all need to come together, become individual advocates, remind each other, screen, check, and detect this cancer early.
Strong words there coming from Dr. Fatima Dan Bata. It's definitely a crusade and a campaign that goes beyond the month of the designated month of October. And more action needs to be done. Dr. Fatima Dan Bata, Medical Coordinator, Medicaid Cancer Foundation, I'd like to thank you so much for coming on our program. It's been great and fantastic having you enlighten us and getting your insights on this issue. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
Elizabeth Omori comes up next.
Gender stereotypes, scholars believe, are inadequate beliefs or expectations about the roles, characteristics, and behaviors of individuals based on gender. There are several consequences of these beliefs. They limit opportunities and choices, promote inequality and discrimination, reinforce harmful behaviors, and affect mental health as well as self-esteem. On this segment, we will assess impacts and suggest solutions to eliminating these beliefs. And my guest, Olajumoke Adeniyi, our gender advocate and head of operations at SAM Foundation, will speak to us. Olajumoke, thank you so much for joining us on Insights.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. It's really my pleasure to be here today.
Thank you so much. Before we limit it to gender issues, how do you perceive stereotyping? Let's begin from there.
Well, stereotyping is just like the word, having a biased or one-way mindset. Where I come from, we say everyone sleeps and we all put our heads on one spot, believing that there is just one side to the coin, instead of embracing the different opportunities and the multifaceted aspect of life.
How come this has a serious toll on women especially?
Now, in most countries of the world, from the history of the women coming into force, we've always known men to be in the force until later, after the World War II. Then women started coming into the workforce. And there was a bit of resistance. And this resistance has been gradually being broken down a bit. And we still see it. Normally, in most people's culture, the woman is expected to be the one, starting from the family, which is the bedrock of every country. The woman is supposed to be, she has this cultural expectations from her. And so this has transcended into the workplace, into the schools, into every facet of life. Not just the low level, every level of the community, especially here in Africa, it's much more pronounced. Although we've seen a lot of interventions, we've seen people trying to ensure that these stereotypes are being changed. We live in a patriarchal society, and sometimes the society has come to have this defense. When you see a woman walk into the room, there is this aspects. Some men have not even been trained to not see her as object, but see her for who she is and what she has to offer. So we see this in different spheres of life. Although we've started doing a lot of advocacy, we ensure that every woman has a safe space. Every woman is healthy. And what is health? Health is the total well-being, physical, mental, emotional well-being of an individual, not just an absence of disease. And so we ensure and we advocate strongly to ensure that we have an environment that is not gender stereotyped, not just an environment where we have people seeing a woman because she's a woman, no, but addressing her because of what she has to offer and the positive impact that she can make in the society. Additionally, one of our leaders mentioned it actually. You know, he's one of the E4She that I can't remember his name, in one of the State House of Assembly. He said that most of you men that are seated here, most of the things that you wore today was determined by your wife. If you dressed up completely from your head to toe, and your wife tells you that you're looking awkward, you will go back in regardless of your office. You go and change. And that's because when you give the woman the power, she has the influence, she has that grace. It's just a natural thing that is given by the Creator to each and every one of the woman, because the woman makes a home, you give her a seed, you know, she turns it to a child. You give her money, she gives you a good pot of soup. So there is really nothing to be defensive about or to stay stereotyped about. Instead, rather, to embrace and accept that complementary gift that has been given to us by our Creator.
What are the factors that influence stereotyping?
Now, some of the factors that affect gender stereotyping. Number one, the traditional gender roles. It has been there since as old as man itself. So we have this thing ingrained into the traditional society and the education. We grew up in a society where our ancestors believed that it was much more better for you to educate a male child than for you to educate a female child. Because why? You think she's going to grow old, go to her husband's house, and then forget about your name, and then that's the end. But that's not true. We have even employment opportunities. Some people, there are some roles that you're not even going to see a woman naturally just come into. But now, thank God, the narratives have been changing. We wouldn't see a woman being a cameraman before, but now it's been changed. We wouldn't see a woman say, oh, I want to be an astronaut. It's just because of the traditional cultural norms and what has been for a while. So it's change might, of course, encounter resistance, but eventually change has its own advantage, and eventually it's going to be for the good of everyone. Take, for example, one of the advantages of having a female in leadership position. We were talking about gender and sexual-based violence, and we discovered, according to research, that 1 in every 3 lady, every 3 girl, every 3 woman will be harassed. We found out that research has shown us that where you have women leading an organization, these roles, these incidences and occurrences tend to reduce drastically. Because why? They know it's a woman there, and she's going to make sure that she puts things straight and put things in order.
How can a woman have a space that is peaceful and safe at the same time?
Now this begins at, number one, the family. We can never remove the family from the center of the discussion, because at the heart of every nation, the family is the core of every nation. When the family is stable, then we end up having, when the family is stable, we have lesser crime rates, we have more productivity when people learn what they're supposed to learn at home. So from the family, we as parents should encourage our male children to take up roles. We don't just say, oh, it's time to cook, tell your sister to go and cook. No, everybody should get up and go to the kitchen and do what they're supposed to do. Number 2, the men should make a support. When you're a man, you should be careful of things you post on social media. Social media is now like one of the spaces where it's like a market, a village square that we used to have in the olden days. On social media, you don't post things that promote women as objects. On social media, when you see a campaign against gender stereotyping, you promote it, share it, let people know what you stand for. When you see somebody treating a woman and saying, oh, this is, even from a little girl, When a little girl, you're asking your little girl, don't tell her, would you like to be a nurse? Start by asking her, do you want to be an astronaut? Or do you want to be a surgeon? Start from don't negotiate with them from the least. Tell them what they would like to be. Let them know that there is nothing they cannot be, that as long as they make up their mind to be anything, they can be whatever they want to be, and they can be whoever they want to be. Let them see the advantage in themselves, rather than seeing themselves as a weak or a disadvantaged population. No. Change that mindset. Speak to every child, every girl you come in contact. Let them know that you are for them, and let them know that you are with them no matter what challenge they face. If we start this in the family, it goes on to the community. It goes on to the community leaders. It graduates to the different roles and the leadership roles in the offices, the schools. The schools should ensure that there are mentorship platforms. They should not shy away from these topics. We should not have lecturers or male lecturers in universities threatening girls. And thankfully, we have one of these advocacy. I happen to be a mentor of the United Nations Population Fund at the Lagos State University before I came to Abuja. And we have this mentorship platform fully supported with the partnership of the state government to ensure that students had mentors. The students came out, they shared their stories. They talked about, at some point, we even got lecturers, people who were assaulting students. Because we had this committee funded, they were apprehended, they were expelled from the university, they were relieved of their duties instantly. And we discovered a reduction in these situations. So when we have voices, when we have constitutions, we have communities, or we have people that speak against sexual gender-based violence as well as gender stereotyping, we are assured to have a community that supports it, that stands for it, right from the male bike rider up to the male highest leader. Everyone is an advocate against gender stereotyping.
What can be done to stop stereotyping?
Okay, it's an human instinct. When you walk into a room, when you're accepted, you see the look on the person's face. Mm-hmm. It is normal. It is a natural instinct, and it's not hard to disregard, or it's not hard to decipher. When you're being told, or you see that you have the same qualifications with somebody, and then the both of you have the same qualification, you're applying for something, and probably that person who's not better than you, or who doesn't seem better than you, happens to be the one getting the opportunity, and though they are saying, oh, you're hearing comments like, oh, they are just women, that's how women do. When you start hearing comments like that's how women do, that's an example of stereotype. How many of you fathers or men watching this TV are raising up your daughters to become just somebody you're spending so much on her? We know how much school fees cost here. Mm-hmm. And you think, are you planning that she's going to end up all that school fees and just sit down in one corner and just end up in the kitchen? No. You want to be proud and say, oh, that's my daughter. And, oh, look at her, that's my daughter. She's making me proud. That's what we want to see in the society. So it starts by making sure you yourself, you are a positive advocate. You speak, you start from yourself. You move on to your circle of friends. You correct them when they say things like that. You stand up when you see somebody trying to make comments like, oh, that's how women do. You tell them, no, you can't afford to talk to a woman like that just because she's a woman. In fact, that is the reason why you should give her the opportunity. After all, you were birthed by a woman. And so you should also respect them and regard them, because I know men don't joke with their mothers. I know that. And that's because mothers are very caring, and God bless their hearts. And secondly, how can we stop this in the society? We can go for campaigns. When you hear about campaigns going on, when they're talking about, oh, stop gender-based violence, when they're talking about stop gender stereotyping, you should share it on your status. Let them know there is more to a woman. We have women now taking the forefront in leadership. We have people, leaders, who are now women, making changes in their different communities. I tell people, the Vice Chancellor of Lagos State, of the University of Lagos, she's a woman. The Vice Chancellor of Lagos State University, she's a woman. These are people making changes. We have seen different women, even in our Senate, at our seats. The First Lady of this country, of course, is a woman. We've seen initiatives, women that have made changes from time immemorial. and they still keep making changes. Let that be your own standard when you look at the woman. Look at what she can offer. Looking at the women that have gone ahead of her, who have been successful, who have added value to the society. Don't look at her from the negative part of what some women have not been able to successfully portray the womanhood in the dignity that she is known for. After all, it takes a woman to bring you up to this point where you are. It took a woman. And then look at the positive value that woman has. And that is what you should use to relate with every other woman. Don't just look at them as, oh, she's just there. She's just an object, or she's just there. That's how they behave. That's how their mindset is. No, look at the positivity, because there is nobody that our maker created to be bad. No, there is a good in everyone as well as a good in every woman.
Interesting. For every man or woman out there that has suffered this, how do we build the confidence of that individual?
Thank you very much. It is never too late for you to build your confidence. It is never too late for you to start afresh. No matter what age, how long you think that this mindset has been going on, it is never too late to start afresh again. So we start first with that mindset. It is never too late. Secondly, begin to make conscious efforts to catch yourself if you happen to do this wrong and correct yourself. In fact, go out each day expecting yourself to be an anti-gender stereotype person or an advocate against gender stereotype. If you believe that this is who you are in your mindset, trust me, you will become it, because everything starts from a mind. The saying says that as someone thinks in his heart, so he is. So if you think about it and you believe that you are a good person, you see women, or you as a woman, you see yourself as an addition to the society rather than to be a victim of circumstances, that is who you're going to portray yourself to be. If you see yourself as you're going to be able to achieve anything that you want to achieve, any height of education you want to get, because the power is in education, the power is in you getting knowledge. As the saying goes, knowledge is power. Get your knowledge, and what do you do with that knowledge? Do you make use of it? Do you use it to help other people? Or are you even, there are some women that are actually even against other women, but are you using your own knowledge to bring up other women, to bring up and go again, making positive change into the society? If each one can reach one, then we can make our community a safe space for each and every one of us and have the perfect utopia that we've always dreamed of. We need to see that we were all made to balance each other. So where the man is getting it, steaming it up, the women are there to bring it down. And there is a balance where everyone is allowed to play their role. Everything is in a proper state of equilibrium where we can get to that perfect utopia that we want. Thank you.
Olajimoke Adeni, a general advocate and head of operations, Hassam Foundation. We want to thank you so much for joining us on Insight, and thank you so much for your thoughts. Thank you very much.
It's always been my pleasure. Thank you very much for this time, and I really enjoyed myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And that's it on this episode of the program. Do join us same time next week for more on Insight. My name is Nnamdi Adikwo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. We'll see you next week. Remain patriotic.